Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Compliance Showcase, which is partnered with SureTech. Our Compliance Showcase has been created in line with our strategy to elevate our offering to our members. This new and exciting edition provides added value to our members, providing a platform for service providers such as SureTech today to showcase their products to members and the compliance community, to provide members with the opportunity to see how the products work, and to find out the benefits of implementing the product or service within their organizations. And this is all without having to set up meetings with prospective suppliers to get more information about the compliance products available. So before we move on, just a couple of house rules. The audience, you can all engage and post questions for SureTech in the Q&A tab. Microphones and cameras are deactivated, but please feel free to chat and engage in the chat box. A quick look at the agenda for this morning. Obviously now opening and welcome again to all of you. After this, I will hand over to Dino, who will start with a presentation and demo. That will be until about 10 o'clock. And after that, there will be time for questions and answers, all in the chat box, of course. And then once we are done with that, I will close the session. So this morning, we are very fortunate to share the platform with Dino Carletti, Head of Sales at SureTech, and AJ Lala, the Senior Solution Architect at SureTech. A little bit more about SureTech and regulatory compliance with Highbond. Diligent Highbond is a GRC cloud-based platform that simplifies and centralizes regulatory compliance management, minimizes risk exposure, and serves up easy real-time reporting. In this showcase session, SureTech will demonstrate how compliance professionals are able to reduce complexity and decrease the risk of compliance gaps by getting your compliance management out of spreadsheets and SharePoint. You will experience how the platform helps to track and map requirements and reduce the time spent documenting and testing compliance. The demonstration will include the automated testing for real-time compliance monitoring, I think something we all aspire to, so that you can prioritize your time on key issues. With built-in reporting and storyboards, you will be provided clear oversight for management and the board and easily demonstrate the necessary compliance for the regulators. So more about our speakers this morning. Dino Carletti is the Head of Sales at SureTech, the exclusive partner of Diligent in South Africa. A seasoned sales professional with more than 25 years of IT infrastructure and software solutions experience, Dino has had the privilege of working closely with executives at leading corporates and government entities in South Africa. With a passion for spreading the word on good governance, compliance, and data management, he is always excited to engage with organizations looking to connect risk, compliance, audit, and ESG for stronger governance. AJ Lala is the Senior Solution Architect with the risk and audit space in the CQS, now SureTech group of companies. He has worked on a multitude of GRC products in his working career, and he has over 11 years of experience in this area. His ability to develop and maintain key relations led him to moving into the Diligent pre-sales role. With that, Dino, welcome to you and AJ this morning, and I'm going to hand over to you then. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Rioni. I really appreciate the opportunity and, of course, appreciate everybody's time. I see we've got 50 odd people that have joined the webinar, which is absolutely fantastic. So what I'd like to do is to introduce who SureTech Solutions is, just to give you some context there. And, of course, at the same time, give you some context as to who Diligent are. There's been some big changes in the Diligent world over the last couple of years. So it'd be good to give you some insight as to what's been happening there. And then, as a precursor to AJ's product demonstration, give you some insight as to what forms part of the Highbond platform, which is what we're going to be demonstrating to you today. Now, in between my slides, we're going to be asking you various questions, right? So we're going to be running a bit of a poll, and you're probably going to get about 5 seconds to answer each question. So, so snap to it. And then, of course, we're going to review those answers at the end of the product demonstration, just before we take questions and answers from you. Now, AJ knows his stuff, and so by all means, don't be shy in terms of asking questions, right? We really would love to see some engagement and a lot of questions from you post the actual demo. Great, so let me share my screen and get cracking with the slides. Fantastic. So we're going to be talking about regulatory compliance on the Highbond platform. Leon did a great job of introducing us already. I'm Dino Carletti, Head of Sales, and AJ Lello, of course, is our solution specialist, who's going to be taking us through the product demonstration. Okay, so who is SureTech Solutions? Well, we're the sole distributor of the Diligent product set throughout the continent of Africa. My focus, though, is, of course, just in South Africa. Technically more than 51% Black female owned. In reality, it's like 71.4%, I think, to be exact. So certainly doing well in that regard. Level 2 BBE compliant. And we do a lot of business with South African government, actually. And to be honest, with many government entities throughout the continent of Africa. Of course, our largest customer base is actually in the private sector, with the likes of Absa Bank being one of our largest customers. But you pretty much find us in every industry within the private sector as well, from large to small companies. Now, we've been working with the Highbond platform for many, many years. And as a result, we've got a really, really strong team of consultants that are able to support our many hundreds of customers across the continent with very little to no escalation required to the actual software vendor in the States or in Canada. So certainly able to be completely self-sufficient and support our customers, both from an application product support perspective as well as a consultant perspective as well. Right, so on to our first question. You should see a pop-up coming up now. How do you manage compliance in your organization? Go ahead and answer that question. We've got 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, great. Have you got that? Right, so let me give you some context as to who Diligent are, right? So now the Highbond platform actually comes out of the Galvanize stable. And Diligent last year acquired Galvanize, Acuvia, and Steel. But Diligent, if you're not familiar with them, they've been hugely successful in the board governance space, right? And so this is where company secretaries are able to create board packs electronically, of course, disseminate those board packs to board members through the board application on an iPad or on a laptop. Of course, the board members would then consume those board packs, annotate on them, share those annotations with other board members, collaborate with other board members, conduct board meetings. And of course, company secretaries can take minutes of those meetings and disseminate that. So really, really efficient platform for board governance. Huge customer base in South Africa. Funny enough, I didn't know that, but very, very big customer base globally, certainly in South Africa as well. So they acquired Galvanize. And so Galvanize, with the Highbond platform, with the leaders in the GRC space, acquired Acuvia, who's got a great ESG platform, so environmental and social governance, and then also acquired a company called Steel, which has got a good compliance platform, but more importantly, they've got great compliance content. And so we're already starting to see some of that content filtering into the Highbond platform now. Fairly soon, I think we're going to start to see that ESG capability slot into the Highbond platform as well as an additional application available to our customers. And certainly what we're going to be seeing is an integration between the Diligent board software and the Highbond GRC application. So you can really see what Diligent is doing here. They're acquiring organizations that are the leaders in their particular area of focus, in their particular domain, and effectively creating this exceptionally powerful governance, corporate governance software application. So the future certainly looks quite interesting and certainly bright under the Diligent banner. So the likes of the Galvanized branding has completely fallen away now. And we'll start to see the same happening with Acuvia and Steel very shortly as well. So everything will effectively be under the Diligent banner. Now, if you'd like more information on this, you can always email us at info@suretech.co.za. We'll be happy to help you. Our second question. You should see that pop up coming up. are your compliance processes siloed or part of a combined assurance strategy? There we go. 5 seconds to answer. Great. Right, so I put this slide in because I want to give you a view in terms of diligence vision for our customers. Right? I'm going to take you back a little bit to a time where, we didn't have things like ERP systems and CRM applications and the like, and where we basically had a whole bunch of different applications, pretty much siloed, pretty much point solutions focused in their own area focus, little integration between them, and again, just reporting on the actual function that they perform. And so what we started to see 40 odd years ago is the likes of your financial management systems and HR and manufacturing and distribution coming together. We know that today to be your integrated ERP platform. So the likes of SAP and Oracle and Microsoft Dynamics are quite strong in that particular space, and Sage as well. And then so shortly thereafter, we started to see your customer information, your sales and marketing systems coming together. We know that today to be your integrated CRM platforms, so your customer relationship management platforms. The likes of Salesforce are quite dominant, very much cloud-based, and catering to a whole wide variety of different industries. And so in more recent years, and certainly amongst your more forward-thinking software vendors, right, is your audit management, risk management, of course, compliance management, point solution applications are coming together, and what Diligent is referring to as your integrated GRC platforms, your governance, risk, and compliance platforms. And this is where we really feel that we differentiate ourselves in the market, with that one application where your various assurance providers can all work together on that single platform and provide that source of truth, that single source of truth back to senior management, right? We're a combined assurance enabling application. And AJ is actually going to show you how all of that works shortly. Okay, question 3. We'll wait for that pop-up. Are you able to get real-time compliance dashboards or reports? I'll give you 3 seconds to answer that one. Great. Okay, so I mentioned Highbond a few times. It's a cloud-based application. We're hosted in Amazon Web Services, which is based in Cape Town, but also in various Amazon Web Services data centers around the world. So you actually do get a choice on where you want to be hosted. Of course, our South African customers typically prefer the Amazon Web Services data center in Cape Town. Now, what makes up the Highbond platform are a variety of different applications and bundled into 3 solutions, right? So the first 5 applications, starting from your left, highlighted in green: enterprise risk management, audit management, regulatory compliance, internal controls management, and FWA, fraud, waste, and abuse management, are bundled together as a single solution under the Highbond platform and underpinned by that Highbond robotics layer, right? What's great about Highbond robotics, if any of you are familiar with ACL, it comes from the ACL application. Think of ACL on steroids, right? And that's now known as Highbond robotics. What we're able to do with that is plug directly into your source data, into your ERP platforms, and on a continuous and on an automated basis, interrogate that data and feed that information back into your compliance and, of course, audit and risk projects as well. What's also great about that Highbond robotics layer is that we can also interrogate within Highbond, right? So we can interrogate your compliance projects and represent how we perform in terms of compliance within the platform and within the organization, and represent that through storyboards. So AJ is going to got some great examples to show you, and so you'll see that shortly in the product demonstration. Right, and so as an additional solution, you can take IT risk management, and a third solution, third-party risk management with a focus on cybersecurity. So essentially what you've got is all 7 applications, all fully integrated on a single platform and underpinned by that Highbond robotics layer, which makes us exceptionally powerful. Last question. You should be getting that pop-up soon. Does your current software solution automate compliance monitoring and testing for timely identification for non-compliance? Great. So that's the end of my slides. I'm going to be handing over to AJ now, who's going to be showing you what the Highbond platform actually looks like and what it can do.
Yeah, thanks, Dino. Yeah, great. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so as Dino mentioned, the technology is called Highbond. Highbond is a cloud-based technology that's hosted by Amazon Web Services. With that being said, what you as a user would do, subscribe to a license, and that would then give you access to the application itself. Now, within the application, what we've done is we've broken it down into different apps. And that's what forms the entire ecosystem, as we call it. And Dino showcased to you earlier how we have fully integrated GRC solution, providing assurance on whether it be risk, audit, compliance, internal control, fraud, incident management, and all of that together on a single central platform. So you'll see these different apps. What we've done is, as an example, projects is an area where you manage internal audit projects. You can manage all your compliance monitoring projects, as well as do basically your risk management, your operational risk assessments, and so forth. Within that, we also have things like issue tracker, task tracker, timesheets, and so forth, which I'll cover as I go through the demo. From a compliance perspective, mission control becomes...
AJ?
Yeah, do you know?
I don't know that we can see your application. I can't see it on my side. Have you shared your screen?
Let me just share again.
Great, there you go.
Can you see?
Yep, I can see it now.
Awesome, great. Great, yeah. So just going back to the ecosystem, it's built up with a number of different apps. And as mentioned, these apps are fully integrated into a single solution. I mentioned projects where you can manage all your compliance monitoring projects, all your internal audit projects. You can manage your operational risk assessments, all using the projects app itself. We also have an app called Mission Control. It becomes really useful from a compliance perspective, where you can build up all these checklists or controlled self-assessments and get input from users within the organization itself. There's also things like Activity Center. So what this does is it's a high-level view, basically showcasing all those issues or findings that you've actually raised in a single central dashboard. Again, the power of this is just within a single click, you're getting an automatic view of exactly what's going on in your organization. From all the findings that you've raised, the details of all the findings are listed out there. And then you've also got your agings, which starts tracking again on the days outstanding and so forth. So that becomes quite useful. Further down under automation, so if you had to ask me, how do you differentiate yourselves from your competitors? I would personally say it's via automation. Right now, we are the only product in the market that, with the use of analytics and robotics, have that capability to go and connect to different data sources. And as we connect to those data sources, we can extract data and automatically bring them directly into what we call the results application. So if your business objective is continuous monitoring of data, then results is where all that magic really happens. Now, results is also an area where you can start building up things like metrics, KPIs, KRIs, KCIs. There's also things like a trigger or a workflow mechanism. So as an exception comes in, if you set up certain conditions and that condition gets met, these triggers then start notifying individuals in the business that something is actually going wrong. Results is also an area where you can build up things like your incident forms, your questionnaires, your surveys, your event forms, your investigation forms. All these different forms can be built out and then pushed out to users in the business. And as they start responding to those forms, that data then comes into the results application itself. So it's all great looking at data in a line-by-line view, but then at times we want to also visualize the data, and that's where storyboards come into play. So storyboards give us that real-time look and feel of the data coming in. It gives us those visuals based on all the data coming through from results. Further down, we've also got things like the strategy app where you can look at things like your strategic or the enterprise risks. This is where you manage those enterprise risks. And then we also have things like frameworks. So frameworks are generally a storage area for all your risk and control information. So you can have a framework specific to your organization, or if you're actually following certain standards and methodologies, things like your COST or your COBIT, NEST, you can build up those specific frameworks. And the reason we do that is we populate everything in the framework is then we start drawing data out of your framework into those different assurance projects that sit in the projects app. And the reason for that is we avoid the duplication of effort or having to recapture risks and controls over and over. There's also a compliance maps function, and this is the storage area for your entire regulatory universe. So all those standards and regulations are then stored in compliance maps, and we start testing by mapping to controls and then start showing an overall compliance score. And I'll showcase to you that as I go through the demonstration itself. But before I do that, I thought I'll just paint one picture for you to showcase how everything is actually brought together onto the Highbond ecosystem in that sense. So we mentioned projects is where you manage those different assurance projects. So whether it's internal audit, operational risk, or your compliance monitoring, as you might call them, your CRMPs, all managed in the project's application. I also mentioned that we start drawing data out of your frameworks. So you start drawing those risks and controls into these different assurance projects, or it could be directly in your compliance monitoring project. However, on the far right, what happens is your compliance maps is where those standards and regulations sit. So what we start to do then is we start taking those requirements and we start mapping those requirements to the controls in the framework. And in turn, those controls can be sitting in different assurance activities or directly within a specific compliance monitoring project. And as your control testing takes place, then this then starts to roll back into compliance maps to show you your entire compliance posture. However, this bottom layer all rolls up to this top section, which we call the strategic environment. And this is where you look at your strategic or enterprise risks. So if you're looking actually for a solution from a combined assurance model, then Highbond actually brings this really well together for you as a user. The underlying technology that makes us actually unique in all of this is that automation aspect. With the use of robotics, we can connect to different data sources. And as we connect to these different data sources, as data comes through, we can start building up those different metrics such as KPIs, KRIs, and KCIs. And with the use of those metrics, we can then start automating. You can start automating your risk assessment process. You can start automating your control testing process. With the use of manual and human data input, such as questionnaires, surveys, incident forms, or just a user capturing information on the application, all that can help with the automation process, which then gets linked up to those different assurance projects. The last step is we move on into a full issue workflow. So whether you call it an issue or a finding or a deficiency or a treatment, you can create all these different areas and link to them. We start creating action items. And action items are basically tasks that can be assigned to members in the organization. No license requirements. A user gets an email, they click on a link, they start responding to that action, and then you start remediating those issues that you've actually identified. So in a nutshell, this is how everything fits together in what we call the Highbond ecosystem itself. So I'm going to actually dive into the demonstration. But before we actually get into it, I'm going to start off with automation. Again, I mentioned this is one of our unique factors, is that ability to get access to data. So generally what would happen in an organization is you either have a data analyst. We provide training to you as a user. So the user is fully upskilled on being able to write their own analytic scripts. The other option is we can actually write those specific scripts for you. And that's how you can connect to the different data sources. So what happens is the analyst will write these scripts. The scripts have some sort of logic which connects to some source system, whether it's an IT system, an ERP system, an HR system. You can connect to all these different systems. We have about 150 different data connectors. So whether your system is sitting in a SAP environment, an Oracle environment, or a SQL database, we can actually connect to that. But what happens from there is we start using robots, and robots helps us with that entire automation process. So what does it look like once we're in robots? You'll see you can create a number of different types of robots within the Highbond platform. I'm looking at things like cyber threats. From an audit perspective, I could be looking at things like duplicate payments. Or the other option is you could be looking at things like data privacy from a POPIA perspective. So what does a robot actually do is it helps us with that automating of the entire process. So in this case, what I've done is I've got a data privacy analysis robot. I've set it up on a schedule, and I said on a weekly basis, every Monday at 2 a.m., I want this robot to kick in and start extracting data from a source system, whether it's an IT system or whatever it is. So on that schedule, this robot then kicks in and automatically starts to push data into the results application. So what does it look like when it enters results? You'll see what we do is we create different folders to store our data. And within each of these areas, we can then manage the exception data. Now, there's different ways for me to look at this data itself. So in this case, we extracted data from a source system that's looking at things like data privacy incidents. And when I go into that, I can actually start looking at the individual records itself. Now, there's a few ways for me to work with this exception data. The one is I can click on one or multiple records. I can then process these records. Processing, I can set up things like, yes, this is a new exception, or we're under reviewing this, or actually might be a false positive and so forth. So you can set up things like statuses, priority, you can put in commentary information, you can upload supporting documentation to motivate that this is a valid exception, or a really awesome feature is what we call the questionnaire feature. So in this case, assuming I wanted to query with HR or something of that sort, is this a valid exception? Or is it a breach of data privacy in that sense? I know the HR manager has no licenses to my application. So as long as they have a valid email address, I can put their email address. I could build up a nice questionnaire, and I can actually shoot this out to the HR individual. What happens to them? They get an email, they click on a link, and as they click on a link, they can actually view the exception that you're querying, and then they would then go and respond to a questionnaire. Now, these questionnaires, again, can be built up according to your look, feel, and layout that you might require. So I've just showcased different examples of types of inputs that I can get. You can get things like text boxes, rating scales. You can get a user to upload supporting documents, or you could even get a user to do things like policy attestations where they can sign a document and submit this information. So once the user responds and submits this information against this exception, what happens is you'll see the responses will start feeding through, and that's how you're managing that remediation process. Now, other ways of working with the exception data is we can start creating visualizations. So you've got different types of visualizations that are actually available for you. And here's an example here. You can see we just did a simple one that's showing the cost associated with all these exceptions coming through. And it starts giving you all of that information in there. So that's the one way of actually just diving into the record set itself. Other ways are you have options of creating things like metrics, KPIs, KRIs, and KCIs. Another useful feature is the trigger function. So this is where we speak about continuous monitoring of data. So what you could do is set up different conditions based on the record or exception data coming through. And then what the system would automatically do is if this condition is met, it starts performing these actions. So you can assign a record to somebody, you can notify somebody, you could trigger an automated questionnaire, you can automatically set the status of this record, or you can assign a priority. And you can also then determine on what frequency you want to analyze this data coming through. So those are the different ways of working with all the exception data coming through into results. But as mentioned, there's times we want to start visualizing the data, and that's where storyboards come into play. So storyboards start to give us a real-time look and feel of the data coming through. Similar to data privacy, here's another way of managing all my exception data coming through. I can build up my different questionnaires, my different incident forms. I can build up all these different variances and get data start coming through into the results app. And because of data coming into results, I can start building those mini visualizations. And using those mini visualizations, we can then build up an entire picture of what's going on using a storyboard. So storyboards give us a real-time look and feel of all that data coming through, and it's on a real-time basis. So this is looking at your compliance and training progress report based on data privacy and protection. It's picking up all the violations in terms of the incidents reported. And then you went through things like your policy attestations and the counts of your who's responded and so forth. And you can track exactly what's going on in the organization. So going back to the solution, that's the entire automation aspect and how we leverage of data, and then we can start using data to start automating different processes. And I'll show you how we do that as I go through the demonstration itself. So the next point, what I'll cover is the compliance maps function and showcase to you how we manage the entire compliance map feature. And with that being said, this is where compliance map sits. You'll see all my different standards and regulations are all sitting in compliance maps. And it starts to give you an overall picture, what's your coverage, what's been covered, are there any issues being raised, and then your overall assurance score. Now, there's different ways of getting this content into the system. If you're following international standards and regulations, when I say international, meaning things like COSO, COBIT, NIST, cybersecurity, you can actually subscribe. So what we've done is we've populated a full-on library with all these different international standards and regulations. So what you as a user would then just go and do is go and select what you subscribe to, and then automatically start bringing them into the compliance maps function. So it's an entire list of different standards and regulations. There's your COSOs, you've got your COBITs, and then you've got all your GDPR, ISO, and all these different frameworks or standards and regulations that are built in there for you. Other ways of getting this data in is you can also create it manually. It's a very step-by-step process. It takes a lot of time and effort to capture the entire regulation manually, but the option is actually available for you. The third way of getting data in is if you've partnered up with a third-party provider, then with the use of our API, which is an application programming interface, we can then start automatically bringing that data through via a third party for you. So what does the data look like when it comes through from a third party? I'll just show you an example of what it would actually look like. So here's an example of Papier. It's an integration from a third-party provider. And as you can see, it's brought all the necessary information, the different sections and so forth. And within each of those areas, you'll see the obligations are also brought through. The benefit of this integration, as you can see, it's brought it into a plain language for me, which is more understandable. And then it's also then brought in all the necessary details in terms of the penalties, as well as all those checklists, questions that a user needs to respond to are automatically brought into compliance map itself. So that's one of the key takeaways, that you can partner with different third parties and start bringing this content into the system itself. So let's just look at another abstract or extract of Papier, and I'll just take you through of how we manage this entire compliance management process within compliance maps itself. Okay, so within Poppy, you'll see right now my coverage is sitting at 66.6%. I've got one issue that's raised. My overall compliance score is sitting at 50%. But how did I get to this? What we've done is within Poppy, you'll see it's broken down into different chapters, conditions, sections, and then it comes to the actual requirements itself. So when I click on a specific requirement, you will see it's got all the necessary information. I can either mark it as applicable to my organization, whether it's covered. And then what we start to do is we start mapping to controls. So in a nutshell, basically what we can do here is if I clicked on this, let's map to a control, you'll see there's artificial intelligence that's just kicking in here. And we call it, the bot is called Maestra. And what Maestra is actually doing is it's scanning my entire Highbond platform. Whether I've been doing risk management or internal audit or compliance monitoring, it scanned my entire system and it's picked up possible controls that it thinks it could match to this actual requirement. So based on this requirement, it's used all the text in this requirement and then scanned and then said, okay, I think these are the controls that you could possibly map to. So it automatically will throw out a list of controls that you think you can map. If not, you could then browse directly to a specific control that might be sitting in a framework, and you can then go through that control and then do the mapping. In this case, we've already got a control that's mapped. You'll see the control has actually failed. We've not raised any issues against that control. But let's dive deeper and have a look at how did this control actually fail. So if I clicked on control 002, what it's doing is it's taking me to my framework. And remember, we said the framework is basically where all your risk and control information is stored. So if I went a step back and we looked at this picture, what we've done is we've taken compliance maps, we've taken the requirement, and we've mapped it to a control in the framework. But in turn, that control is going to be sitting into a compliance monitoring project, or a CRMP, as you might call it. So in this case, if I scrolled further down, you'll see it's linked to a specific CRMP, which was POPIA monitoring. So as I click on that, this is what my CRMP looks like. I'll dive into more details on the CRMP as we go through, but let's look at how we did the control testing and monitoring. So there's a few different ways to test for compliance. One is you might need to physically inspect or validate that something is in place or not. The other option is what we've done in this case, in this first control, logical access to production data, is we've automated the control testing process. And how did we automate the control testing process? You'll see we used analytics to connect to a data source. We extracted data and we pushed that data into the results application. As data came into results, we started building things like metrics, KPIs, KRIs, and so forth. And using those metrics, we can then start building up thresholds. So in this case, I've brought a metric in, which is looking at the total production access to open incidents. And based on that metric, I then set up thresholds. I said, if the metric is less than 5, consider my control is operating effectively or compliant. If it's greater or equal to 5, then this control is actually a failure. So on a continuous monitoring basis, analytics will keep running on each schedule, pushing data to results. Results will then update the metric, and it will then automatically pass or fail this control for me. So again, power of analytics coming into play by being able to automate your control testing process. The next step is, the third way is linked to certain standards and regulations. You'll notice those checklists that come through. And this is where we can start using things like controlled performance. Controlled performance allows us to build up things like controlled self-assessments or checklists. So in this case, there's a POPI Section 19 checklist, and you'll see the questionnaire looks something like that. It's got all the questionnaires built in. And what we then do is we start putting this on a schedule. So in terms of the schedule, all I do is I determine who the control performers are, those individuals in the business that need to respond to this checklist. They don't require licenses. And what we then do is we put this on a schedule. So assuming you needed to show for compliance on a quarterly basis, what happens is we call it a set and forget thing. You set up this questionnaire or this checklist, you put it onto its schedule, and automatically when it reaches its target date, it will automatically push these checklists out to those individuals in the business. The user then responds, and as they respond, that data then comes in and automatically feeds in and helps us determine whether this control is either operating effectively or compliant or non-compliant. Now, this information then all rolls back into compliance maps. So what happens is, as you'll see, we do a bottom-up roll-up. My entire Chapter 3, I'm sitting at a 50% compliance. However, Chapter 2, we haven't yet started testing our controls. So right now, my overall compliance score is sitting at 50%. A few steps back, let's go into that compliance CRMP and see what it actually looks like. It's actually a project that we build up. And within that project, what we've done is we've broken it down into different processes. Within each process, you'll see what I've done is I've got all my necessary risk and control information. So there's my risks that I've identified. I've done the rating of my risks based on my impact and likelihood. I've linked them to certain controls, and then we've done the control testing. As a control passes or fails, you can then start creating different issues or mitigations or actions and so forth. So under the issue management tab, this is where you can start building up those different types of issues or findings that you've got, and then you can capture all the necessary information relating to the finding. But under that finding or that issue that you've identified under follow-up and remediation, this is where you can start creating things like action items. And action items are tasks that can be assigned to individuals in the business who will then start responding to these actions to help remediate those issues that you've identified. How do I report throughout this entire process? You'll see there's pre-built reporting within the system. So at any given point, you can either output into a PDF or into an Excel document. In this case, we're trying to output my issues with my actions. Again, a single click, and within a couple of seconds, I'm immediately getting an output showcasing what are my issues and what are the action items that are listed there. So this is just potentially an output showcasing what you can get out as an output. Other types of outputs, what we can actually do is we could use analytics and robotics, not only to connect to external source systems, but we can actually connect to our internal environment. So whether we're entering risk or control information from an internal audit perspective, we can pull out all that information from our projects app into the results app and start visualizing using a full-on storyboard. So what do other type of storyboards look like? If you're doing things like controlled self-assessments, you'll see you can track exactly what your controlled self-assessments are, what's the open questionnaires, who's responded, who's not responded, and capture all of that information in there. Another nice storyboard is getting an overall picture from a compliance perspective. And this is where we're looking at a full-on compliance storyboard based on the ISO 27001 framework. You can see it's tracked my assurance score over a period of time. So I can see how well we've been performing right to the point where we are at today. Within ISO 27001, you'll see it's broken down into different process areas. As part of our CRMP, this is where we did the control testing. So what it's done is it started putting percentages into play. So the higher the percentage, the more effective those controls are. The lower the percentage are where my controls are actually failing. And in a single click view, I can immediately pick up what's actually going on in the organization itself. And then I can drill down into very much detail, picking up all the findings, all the necessary information, the findings by severity, and all of that information in the system itself. So that's how we actually use storyboards. Here's other types of other storyboards. We're looking at it from a cybersecurity perspective, where we're looking at things like your ISO 27000 as well as the NIST framework. You'll see I've brought in a number of metrics that have brought all that information in. And then you can start picking up all the necessary information or building these visuals. Now, the power again of these visualizations, I can actually start sharing this with anyone that is licensed, or what the system also does is it creates a web link. So this web link can be copied and can be then shared with anyone in the organization. And as they click on that storyboard, they will then start getting that real-time view of the entire storyboard itself. There's also a feature where you can export the storyboard into different formats itself. The last aspect that I'll just cover from a compliance perspective is we spoke about that you can integrate with a third party and start bringing this data in. However, with that integration, it also allows you to start doing your regulatory change management, and you can start tracking exactly what's happening. So how do we do that basically is we use the compliance maps feature, and based on that API bringing the data in, we can start managing all those regulations or the integration. So in this case, you can see we're looking at things like anything that's new, any changes that are coming through, or anything that's repealed that's coming through. So if I clicked on something that's changed, as I click on it, it starts to automatically show me what the changes are in that sense. So you'll see there's the records that come through. This is what's been new, that's new, and then what's actually the old stuff. And immediately just looking at this, you can start picking up that actually there was a new checklist that was introduced. So I could then go into that record. I could select that record, process this record and say, yes, we're actually implementing this, or we're just under reviewing right now, and let's track what our status is. And then again, we can put commentary information. And then from a visualization perspective, you can again build up a storyboard, and the storyboard then helps you track exactly what's going on in terms of all the regulatory changes. So what's new, what's repealed, and what's changed. And then again, those links are built into the application. So if I wanted to go and see what's changed, a single click, and it automatically then draws me into my compliance maps function. And within compliance maps, it will immediately take me to the change that has actually occurred in there, and I can start tracking that. So in a nutshell, that's the power of automation within a compliance process and how we manage it using the compliance system. I'm happy to hand over to Dino or to start taking some questions, and we can move forward from there.
All right, AJ, brace yourself. We've got a ton of questions. So I think, firstly, Roxanne, maybe you can guide me here. We're going to show the results of the poll. Do you want to show that first? There we go. Poll 1, lots of manual management. Very interesting. Great. Poll 2, are your compliance processes siloed or part of combined assurance? Yeah. Partially, audit, risk, and compliance can do more together. Okay. Seems to be the leader there. Poll 3, are you able to get real-time compliance dashboards or reports? No. Wow. Big percentage of you saying no. And 4, does your current software solution automate compliance monitoring and testing for timely identification of non-compliance? No. Wow. Okay. So again, just highlighting the fact that a lot of the processes are quite manual. Right. AJ, let's have a look at our first question. Does the platform include GACP, generally accepted compliance practices, as an optional framework to the likes of COSO?
Yeah, so there are frameworks that are built, but again, all based on a subscription basis. So you would need to subscribe. The only one that I think COSO and COBIT are actually complementary, and they're available for you automatically. So you could just leverage off that, and then anything else you would need to subscribe to.
Okay, you want to show yourself, AJ?
Yeah, I can do that.
All right. Next question, are these frameworks already loaded in the system to be accessed, or does it require a lot of manual input upfront?
Yeah, so I showcased a few different scenarios. One is the frameworks that are pre-built. We spoke about those international frameworks. Those are pre-built, and then all you would do is subscribe to them and then gain access to them. But then there is an aspect of, do you want to integrate with a third party? Do you want to upload your content on your own, so that you can do that as well with manual and automated fashion? Yeah.
Okay, great. Right, and this is a user interface question. One of the dislikes we have on the current ERP platform is that it takes the user to different tabs in navigation. Does your solution show all of the key data or information on the same screen?
Yeah, so there's different ways. So I took you through the entire compliance process using a few different apps, things like compliance maps. We looked at projects to do your compliance risk management plans. But if you want everything on a single click view, then what we can start doing is the power of automation again, extracting all that data, feeding it into our results app, and then visualizing it in a storyboard. So you've got a single view, similar to the storyboard I showed you on the ISO 27001 framework. It brings it all in a single click view for you. Yeah.
Okay, then do all of the controls have to be manually uploaded?
No, so actually you don't. Within Highbond, we have a feature called the bulk upload or bulk import. The system will provide you a template. Your questions or controls can all be listed on, loaded onto that template. And then it's just a matter of dragging and dropping, and it gets automatically uploaded for you.
Great. Okay, then on the chat, Pranisha asked the question which I'd responded to, but for everyone's benefit, let me read it out. For how long would the data be stored on the platform? So indefinitely, for as long as you've got a valid subscription to the platform, the data will be there. And of course, there's no limit to the amount of data that you can have on the platform as well. You're not measured in that regard at all. Okay, then Pallavi is asking, what gets recorded in the issues workflow? And are the non-compliances or breaches included as an issue?
Yeah, so on the issue, you can actually put in the non-compliance. It just depends in which, generally we would put it on the control detail. where you do the control detail. So that's where you'll put in the non-compliance, and if there's any penalties associated, you can actually put that on the control detail itself. So not really on the issues tab, but can also be captured on the issues once raised. Yeah.
Okay, then Lauren is asking a question, which I think Pranisha is also referring to. The question goes, for the International Library, how often is it updated? And do we have to select each standard individually, or is it, well, I'll tell you what, let's tackle the first question first, right? So for the International Library, how often is the data updated? And then similar to that, Pranisha is saying, in South Africa, the legislation is changing all of the time through board notices, new acts and government gazettes. Would the new amended legislation be automatically uploaded and data updated, or is this a manual process at an additional cost?
Yeah. So the first question was, Dino, repeat the first one, sorry.
Tied to the second one, right? So they're basically similar. How often is the data updated? And the question is all the time.
Yeah,
so the answer.
Absolutely, all the time. So anytime there's new, whether it's an international standard or not, any updates, you'll automatically get feeds. The system will also notify you that there's new updates coming through. But then local to South African regulations and so forth, I showed you the regulatory change management and how we manage that in compliance maps using the results application. So you can start tracking, but based on that third-party feed, you'll automatically and constantly get updates of any changes to the regulation. If you don't go that option, yes, it is a manual process. Will take some time to manually track.
All right, then Lauren's second question is, do we have to select each standard individually, or is it grouped?
So I don't know what you mean by each standard individually. In terms of importing those international standards?
I suspect.
Yeah. Yeah, you could get a group of standards. Like if you're looking at NIST or cybersecurity, there's a number of regulations. If you're looking at from an IT RM perspective, it will have a group as well of certain regulations together.
Okay, just looking at Lauren's third question, is there an extra cost for each standard, or is it inclusive? And I suspect that her second question was kind of linked to that one. So Lauren, we're not a content provider. Of course, we do have a variety of different frameworks and whatnot that you can import into the system. But of course, the legal acts and the like, we typically rely on third-party providers. And so some of them will charge on a per act basis, and others will charge on a per source basis, irrespective of the number of acts that you're looking from that source. So the costs do vary. And the models do vary depending on the provider in that regard. Okay, Maseko is asking, he's in Botswana, how long will it take for us to come up with the compliance maps, different legislation and application through similar principles, although similar principles to South Africa? How long will it take us to come up with the compliance maps?
You're going to answer that, you know?
No.
No. So yeah, same principle as you would follow here in South Africa, right? If there's a third party, we can bring it in, or you just build up manually, or you subscribe to content. So timelines are almost the same. Yeah.
Okay. Right then. Okay, I think I tackled Pranisha's question around changes to the content. Can you import an already populated CRMP into this tool and let robotics analyze the data and present results in a dashboard format?
Yes, we can. So we can import a CRMP using the bulk upload. We can then use robots to automate, extract the data from the CRMP and presenting in a storyboard, definitely.
Right, Vusi is asking, are you able to extract data and assess it from policies, practices, etc., through your data analytics?
So it just depends where the source data is, right, Vusi? Do you have a system or an application that's managing all of this? If yes, then definitely we can extract and do analysis on. Yeah.
All right. Hildegard is asking, is there a screen where one loads and risk rate your compliance universe that then links through to the detailed CRMP?
Yeah, so the way we manage that process, Hildegard, is we in the system I showed you that my PowerPoint presentation where we use projects to create different types of projects. So you'll have a number of different CRMPs, and on each CRMP you can do a risk rating on each one. And then again, you can use that data, extract it to results, and then have a full-on storyboard just showing you all the risk-rated CRMPs and then doing a sorting and filtering and so forth. So it is possible.
Okay, there's a few cost questions coming up, and Marlene is looking for some information in that regard. Marlene, it varies depending on the environment that you're in. You're absolutely welcome to reach out to me, and we can have a conversation. I can give you something that's more tailored to your environment, and that goes for all of the audience for that matter. Right, Pilates is asking, how will the system deal with the consolidated multidiscipline acts and regulations, CRMPs, rather than single act CRMPs?
Yeah, so projects, so when you say consolidated multidiscipline acts, again, projects is the area that you can do it. You can consolidate everything into one, or you can break it up by creating different types of projects or CRMPs, as we call it. So it's entirely up to you. Same with the regulation that you're importing or bringing into compliance maps. If you're doing it on a regional basis, you can do it on a regional basis, or you can have it all consolidated into a single one, and then start mapping to different CRMPs. The option is entirely up to you.
Okay, great. And then Lauren is saying, what is your source for regulatory updates? I think so we did mention that we can partner with various content providers, and then of course bring that data into the platform. Often what we find, of course, is that if somebody is a content provider as well as an application provider, they typically lack in one area, right? I've never come across somebody that's got a fantastic platform and then also exceptionally good as far as regulatory updates is concerned. So we've got a brilliant platform, and of course we can partner with multiple content providers around the world and bring that data into the platform.
Tina, your video is lost.
Yeah, something went a little bit funny there. I'll fix it now and we'll answer the next question. Right. Okay, do the fees depend on the number of integrations with different platforms? No, Esmarie, it doesn't. We can connect to as many source systems as you like. Within the platform, there's a whole bunch of built-in connectors that enable us to connect to all of your sort of key applications that you would typically find. Now, of course, if there isn't a standard connector, and I think we've got about 150 odd, but if there isn't a standard connector, invariably the data would be sitting on some sort of SQL or Oracle database. And so, of course, through ODBC connections, we would still be able to connect to that data anyway. The only platform or the ERP system that requires an additional cost is if you have SAP, right? And so there is a SAP connector fee on a per instance basis. And there's a charge associated with that simply because we maintain a SAP certification, a SAP compliance certification that's obtained via SAP that they're happy for us to integrate, and we integrate in a safe manner. Right, Esmarie's also asking, what happens if you want to unsubscribe? Would you still have access to your archived data? No, if you unsubscribe, you will, of course, have an opportunity to extract your data. Yes, it's as simple as that. So your data is live and accessible for as long as you have an active subscription.
Yeah, so there is an export function, right,
Right, okay, great. Good. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so there is actually an export function. So if you decide you're unsubscribing, you can export all of your data. It pushes it into a zip folder for you per project, and everything is stored. Whether you've uploaded an attachment, your CRMPs, all the data is extracted into different outputs like PDF and Excel documents as well.
Yeah. Hey, is my video back now, AJ?
Yeah, it's back.
Okay. Right, so we are a global company This is in Cornwall. We're a global company and wondering if your solution provides acts and regulations from Europe and North America, like the pre-populated SA Act, e.g. Companies Act. So one of our content providers is able to source content from around the world, right? They've got a very unique way of scraping content from various countries and then bringing it into the Highbond platform. And this is on the basis of a strategic relationship between this organization and Diligent globally. So yes, we can cater for content in the rest of the world. Would it be possible? This is Brandon. Would it be possible to use or play around with test software? We're happy to do POCs, Brandon. Of course, there's a lot of work that goes into a POC, and so. There are some conditions associated with that. We don't readily have software available for you to simply just play with it. There's a very structured, project-managed proof of concept exercise that we undergo with our prospective customers. So happy for you to reach out to me if that's something you're interested in. Okay, let's see here.
That's a compliment.
All right. Well, I'm definitely going to read that one out. So Lebo was saying, morning CISA family, just to share, our organization went through a rigorous process with Dino and AJ and team together, construct a product offering from SureTech that meets our specific organizational needs. SureTech got our yes, and we now await approvals from the powers that be, but excellent product and excellent team. Thank you, Lebo. Really appreciate that. All right, Paladi is asking, is your system restrictive in regard to the format the information should be provided by a third-party legal content provider, or do you have your own format in which the information should be provided?
Yeah, Lebo, Paladi, so it's not restrictive at all. With the use of an API, as we extract that information, we can break it down into any format that we want to be able to bring it. So if you're looking at your information in compliance maps at a high level, or if you want to break it down to the lowest possible level, we can actually do that using the API and our analytics tool. So not restrictive at all.
Yeah. Right. Hildegard is asking, how flexible is the system in respect of user requirements? I often find that systems don't provide for everything we need, i.e. additional fields on controls, monitoring, etc., and also don't accommodate direct small changes by users like adding fields, but any changes require development, which has a cost implication.
Yeah, so Hilda, one of our platform philosophies is that we built on configuration over customization. So we don't do any customization. There is no backend application where you do coding in that. Yes, you can configure new fields, additional fields, and changes are pretty simple, right? They all happen on the front end. So part of your training and implementation, we showcase to you how you actually do these changes, and then you take control and manage those changes.
Okay, and then Pranisha is asking a similar question that we had earlier, which I've not yet covered. As an external compliance practice, we have a number of clients we look after. Would the system be able to have different tabs for each client? So Pranisha, we're not, the application is not a multi-tenant application in the sense that you, as a compliance practitioner or a person that has a compliance practice, could, through Highbond, manage multiple clients, right? It's not a managed services offering. So typically what consultants will do, or for any organization that outsource their compliance practice, they would procure the Highbond platform. And then, of course, you as the practitioner would be accessing each individual client's Highbond platform to manage compliance. Yeah. So so we don't allow for one platform to service multiple companies. Okay, Ismarie is asking, would I be able to give my external CEO access to the system for monitoring purposes? Yeah, and then she acknowledges that we just answered that. So absolutely, so through the likes of storyboards, right, AJ? And with the link, in fact, a license wouldn't be required. Okay, so as long as you're sharing that storyboard link with whomever, if they've got that link, they'll be able to see exactly what's going on within the business on a real-time basis without actually requiring a license. Okay, let's just see if there's any other questions here.
No.
Does the analytics automation work if the policies are all in a Word format?
So this is a tricky one.
Well,
so,
it would be imported into Highbond, AJ. So you're not going to run analytics on a Word
against
document.
a Word document, yeah.
Correct. It needs to be, of course, those policies and the like need to be uploaded into the framework in order to run the analytics. All right. Then, so the third-party feed is an additional cost, and how many feeds would need to be considered? Yes, to answer your question, there is an additional cost for feeds. And, it's not something we typically provide. If you want to procure through us, that's fine. Happy for you to, if you've got an existing subscription with a content provider, happy to work with that content provider. And through APIs, we can bring that data into the Highbond platform. I don't believe that there's any limitation in the numbers of feeds that we could bring into the platform. That shouldn't be an issue at all. I don't know if I tackled this, AJ. Do all controls have to be manually uploaded?
We've addressed it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Right, and then Hildegard again is asking, following on from Pranisha's question and your answer about multiple entities, how does the system handle multiple entities in groups? So Hildegard, if you're referring to a holding company with multiple group companies, not an issue, right? You're going to have it's not an issue. AJ, maybe you can explain a little bit more how we segregate or show different group structures within one legal entity. Yeah.
So there is a few different ways. In terms of compliance maps, you can break it down per entity or region, as I mentioned. We also have what we call, when you build up your CRMPs, an entity structure. So you can build up your entire organogram and then start mapping the CRMPs to these specific entities. And what that allows you to then do is you can start doing your roll-up reporting and sort of roll up to that top level that you're looking for. Yeah, so that is possible.
So my response, sorry, go ahead, AJ.
No, go ahead, Dino.
Okay, my response previously in terms of group limitations is is focused more along the lines of licensing restriction, right? Not necessarily application ability. Yeah. Okay, great. I think that's all of our questions. Yeah, I think that's it. Well, thank you very much. Rioni, shall I hand back over to you?
Thank you, Dino and AJ, for a very enlightening presentation and demo. I think the couple of things that stood out for me from your demo this morning, AJ, you're going to like this, the power of automation. Yeah. I think we've been talking about automation and artificial intelligence and how it's going to impact on compliance, and it's real. It's real in your system. So that was really nice to see. I like specifically things that I liked about it is the continuous monitoring of data, setting up certain conditions, and then if it matches, it pushes out a report to exception data. The mapping up to controls where the AI actually picks up on possible controls. That is like really groundbreaking, The compliance storyboard really feeds into more effective reporting. I've spoken to a couple of compliance officers in the past couple of months where the need is, how do we make our reports, compliance reports, more effective, more interesting, and not have reams and reams on pages and pages of reporting that just really doesn't speak to the audience. So I think that is quite a strong point. And then I think all of this is happening on a real-time basis. That is really profound, So that is where we're aiming for. That is the power of the compliance monitoring. If we can get to that spot, that is what's going to make the difference. And then I think the other important thing that I picked up on here was that your content can be sourced from around the world. You mentioned scraping. Do you know what's scraping?
Yes, very much a technical term. And it was something that, well, rather a term that I inherited from one of the service providers. And effectively what they're doing is consuming content from various websites and then bringing it into their platform. Yeah.
Now, I sort of could get that, but it was like, oh, interesting new word. We're learning, huh? Yeah, I think. I think on that note, Dino and AJ, thank you so much for joining us this morning. All of you in the audience, I'm going to give you a challenge. It's not a what do you call it? It's a challenge to my South African and our Southern African compliance officers. Guys, we've got the IFCA Congress coming up next week. The International Federation of Compliance Associations International Compliance Congress. It's from the 4th to the 6th of October. Such subjects and topics that will be discussed are very much the theme of the Congress is compliance in an era of global complexity. I don't think I need to say a lot about that. All of us are living in these complex times. There will be perspectives from all over the world, from experts in the respective disciplines. The impact of technology. So, Dino, you guys might even be interested in joining that specific section. Sure. ESG, anti-financial crime, global issues, all of this, how does it impact on compliance? If you book through us, the Compliance Institute, we give you a 10% discount on that price. It's 1,350 Rand for 3 days of international global exposure to all of these issues. For Southern Africans, let us make a good, solid show at this International Congress. So thanks. I see there is the link to book for the IFCA Congress. Thank you for that. And I think on that note, everyone, have a fantastic day. And Dino and AJ, thanks again. You can contact them. I'm sure you will want to. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.